Welcome back to the 2024 college football full season predictions, college football playoff predictions, and Heisman finalist and Heisman predictions. And let's get right into it with the conference breakdowns for the Power Four. And once I reveal who my college football playoff selections are, we will get into the group of five conference champion, highest ranked as well. So let's start with the SEC here. And keep in mind, everyone, that the schedules for a lot of teams, including Georgia, including Bama, including, a lot of the mainstay teams that we've seen over the years, are getting significantly more difficult this year. Georgia has 3 marquee road games, all on the road, at Bama and also at Ole Miss. I could see a world where they lose all 3 of those, and they also have to play Clemson in the non-con. So let's get right into it here. And my 2 finalists, again, and as I've said, there are a large amount of tiebreakers here to go through. And remember, there's no divisions anymore. So what we have is a logjam of a tiebreaker that the Texas Longhorns and Texas A&M Aggies come out on top. And so those 2 teams are in the SEC championship. A&M is part of the logjam. Texas is just above it. A&M has the win against Texas. And since they are alone on top of the SEC, they break the tie with the Georgia, LSU, Bama, Ole Miss. Those teams are all in the tiebreaker. And A&M gets through because I have them winning that rivalry game at home, mind you. If it wasn't at home, I might change my mind on that. But I have A&M winning that and getting to the SEC championship, where I think they fall to the Longhorns to become a 4-loss team. And we'll see whether they can beat Notre Dame in week 1, which could alter this prediction. But I have Texas and A&M being in the SEC championship with Texas on top. And then I have Georgia with a very good shot at the playoff. I think they make the playoff in this scenario. LSU making the playoff with a quality non-conference win against USC. Georgia getting one against Clemson. And then Alabama, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Missouri, Oklahoma, and even Florida, who has the most brutal schedule in the whole country. I could see any of those teams making the playoff. I have all of those teams in my power rating top 25 in the preseason. So that is 10 SEC teams in the top 25. This is definitely the most loaded conference, and these schedules are going to be grueling this year. So with that out of the way, let's move to the Big Ten, where I see a Ohio State versus Michigan championship. I could see a path where Oregon could get in here, depending on how they can do on the road, but I think they have a couple really tough road games at Wisconsin, and the most notable one is at Michigan. And then they also have to beat Ohio State at home. They've owned Ohio State, but I think that Michigan edges out the Oregon Ducks with a head-to-head win, and that will prove enough for their case. I do have Ohio State beating Michigan in the conference championship game, and this would just be a nightmare scenario along with that SEC scenario where you have these games in back-to-back weeks. Might have people rethinking this divisional format there. And both would come from one division traditionally, and the SEC would be the West, which isn't all that surprising considering the shape of the East in recent years. And in this case, it would be the Big Ten East there. So going down the line, I have Oregon making the playoff by a wide margin. Iowa, Penn State, USC, Wisconsin, and even Nebraska I kind of threw in there just because of how their schedule stacks up in the first 7 games before they go to the shoe to play Ohio State. I think they could get a little smoke in that college football playoff conversation as well. And let's go to the Big 12, probably the most fun conference, as I could see any of these teams on the screen right now winning the conference outright. I currently, in my projections, have it being Oklahoma State against Utah in the conference championship game. Oklahoma State is the 1 seed there, but I do have Utah winning the conference championship there, so I guess you could flip them over. But I could also see K-State, Arizona, Iowa State, West Virginia, UCF, and Kansas all being in it. For West Virginia, a big help to their resume could be if they can upset Penn State in week 1. I already gave out that kind of betting lock nugget in the way too early video, if you want to click on that in the top right now. But I think West Virginia has a good shot in that game. And a lot of these Big 12 schedules, it just might come down to the home and road splits. Kansas, why they have them so low, there's a couple questions. Daniel's health. And then also, they are not going to be playing at their own stadium. They're going to be playing at Arrowhead and sometimes at the other Kansas City stadiums. So I don't see Kansas as a real threat, but, it's a conference that any of these teams could win. And most of these other power conferences, I think a lot of teams can get into the championship game, but not a lot, if they play a juggernaut, can win, in my opinion. But the Big 12, a notable exception there. Then finally, the one you may have all been waiting for is my crazy prediction going on in the ACC. So what we have here, and you will not like it. It's an SMU against Virginia Tech ACC championship game. Are these the best teams in the ACC? They are not. I will admit that. I don't think anyone thinks that at all. SMU is a borderline top 25 team. Virginia Tech's a bit lower. The place where it gets complicated is these out-of-conference and conference schedules. SMU's is so easy. The only two tough games that they have is a home game against Florida State, and you guys want me to pick upsets all the time, so I'm going to give SMU that game. I'm going to give them a loss at Louisville the week after. I'm going to have SMU dropping another game, maybe at Duke, down the line. So they will have 2 losses. Virginia Tech, I also project to have 2 losses. Florida State, same thing. Clemson, 3, just because of the out-of-conference loss to Georgia, but 2 in conference. And then Miami's up there. NC State may or may not be up there. I'm not sure. And then Louisville is always a sneaky team. One other team that I didn't put on here, Syracuse, Kyle McCord, they have a very workable schedule, and I wouldn't be surprised if they made a run. So Virginia Tech, I have them beating Clemson at home, so that kind of gives them the edge there in this massive tiebreaker. And SMU beat Florida State and those teams don't really play any of the other top dogs like Miami and then, an NC State that's also in that tiebreaker. So this would be a disaster, and it would lead, and I think SMU is the better team. Virginia Tech rated a little lower in the power rating, so I'm going to have SMU winning the ACC in their first year. I think that the fallout from this, it would be an unmitigated collapse of the ACC almost immediately by all the member institutions complaining about the schedule imbalances because SMU gets preferential treatment to play Cal and Stanford. This traveling is too much, and at Florida State getting snubbed again, nobody would like that. And I think it would create a less interesting playoff to have SMU in there. You'll see where I project them to go in the playoff. But before that, let's get into my Heisman finalist predictions as it kind of goes. Now that we're through the conference championship game, who are the Heisman finalists? And I had A&M getting to the conference championship game, so I've got Wegman as a finalist. They will have massively outperformed. I think Elko's a great coach. And the question is how much A&M will actually be slinging the football. I think they will do it a bit. Before his injury, I thought he was looking pretty good. Last year, this could be a breakout season for him. So that's my boldest prediction here, besides the last one that we'll get into later. Carson Beck, Georgia, I think they'll just be an offensive juggernaut. The question is, and I am pricing in a little bit of this SEC bias here. The reason I don't have Ewers, even though they're the best team in the SEC, I just don't really believe in him as much as I do Carson Beck this year. I think that they'll have a little more room with their, defense to work with these games. I think Georgia could just blow up teams in the games that they win, whereas Texas, I think they might have to escape a couple times. And I think that Carson Beck will have better numbers at the end of the season. Then we've got Dylan Gabriel. Again, not in the conference championship game, but I think he'll put up great numbers this year for Oregon. And, I could easily see Oregon getting to the conference championship. And finally, probably my boldest is Donovan Edwards, best running back in the country. Now that we're down to this 4 finalists segment, I think that best running back / receiver in the country probably will get it, even if they have no chance to win. So I do have Donovan Edwards getting it here, and I would probably have Dylan Gabriel winning it in this situation because I think that the Oregon offense will be the most potent. Some other guys I will run over and why I don't have them here, Will Howard. I think that they will just have too potent of a run attack here, whereas Michigan, I don't think they'll have any sort of pass game at all, so it'll be all Edwards. Jaden Milroe, I think that Alabama offense may take a step back this year, along with them not being really, they're just in that stack in the SEC. I think that the stats for Beck will be better. Jackson Dart, I think they've got a lot of other pieces there that might work for them. And then a big one, Cam Rising. He was probably the closest to being on here because I didn't have a Big 12 player, and I could see, this narrative of the comeback year. I could certainly see that, so I was tempted to put him on here, but I don't really think he has a very realistic shot of actually winning it just because of Utah's style of play. So now let's get into the full playoff field that I have here and predictions. So 1 seed, Ohio State. 2 seed, we've already been over these conference champions. I've got Texas at the number 2, Utah taking the easy 3 spot, and then SMU taking the 4. My Group 5 team is Liberty. I don't like Liberty. I think there's better Group 5 teams out there, but look at their schedule. It's 134 out of 134 in the FBS. They don't play any Power 4 teams. Boise State has to play Oregon. Memphis has to play good teams, App State, any other team you can think of has to play at least one Power 5 game. And I really hope it's not Liberty because I would hate to see this Oregon-Liberty matchup in the 5-12 again. And I think the committee might even try and mitigate that by dropping Oregon a seed. But how I have it raw power ratings-wise, I think Oregon would be the number 5 team based on my projections there. And I think they would wipe out Liberty in that game. But before we get ahead of ourselves, we've got number 6, Michigan, actually getting to the Big Ten championship, a couple marquee wins on their belt. And, I could see the committee flopping Oregon and Michigan because Michigan did beat Oregon. The question is how they will dock the team that lost in their conference championship game. So Oregon or Michigan against Liberty, and then Oregon against Texas A&M. That could also be a good game. But 7, Georgia, already went over it. Great team, but get just a brutal schedule. 8, LSU. As I mentioned, this is kind of a dark horse pick by me, but if you look at their schedule, if they are able to beat USC in that out-of-conference game, the SEC schedule is manageable, and they have a lot of home games, and that's one of the best environments in college football and should help them if the defense is ready to take a step up. Number 9, Iowa. Look at their schedule. It's so doable if they can just get some production out of the offense, which is very much a question mark right now. And, half of these predictions could look completely stupid, but we'll see if Iowa can dial it in on offense. Oklahoma State, loser of the Big 12 championship game with an impressive record there. And then Texas A&M, 4 losses. I don't know what would be happening here if a 4-loss team could get in besides Florida. So have an asterisk next to that Texas A&M there. I have them losing to Michigan anyways, so let's jump into the bracket. I already revealed I have Oregon over Liberty in that matchup, just not even close there. And then Texas A&M going to the north to play Michigan. And we will also see how these kind of Big Ten teams in the cold are treated by the committee. Then 7-10, Georgia, Oklahoma State, and this is just going to be a wipeout at Sanford. And then we've got Iowa against LSU. I've got LSU pulling it off at home. If this were a flipped venue, I could see it being a bit closer of a game, but that brings us to our final 8, and now we're into the bowl games. We've got Ohio State against LSU. I think this is a wipeout. LSU's gone further than most people would have them going. And then we've got Oregon against SMU. I see this as another wipeout. So far, we've got 2 uncompetitive finals. Utah, Michigan is one where I think we'll see a great game. I could see this one going to overtime. I see Utah barely edging out Michigan there. Then Georgia, Texas, also a masterful game. So I think 2 competitive quarterfinals and 2 not so competitive ones. But I do see Georgia winning that game. And it will be another thing to watch for is whether this momentum from having a first-round game will carry over or whether the time off and the preparation and the rehealing will be good for teams that get the bye. We will see, because sometimes in the NFL over the past few years, we've seen that the teams with byes actually suffer a bit, but we'll just have to see here. Ohio State, Oregon rematch. I had Oregon winning the first one in my official prediction. Now I have Ohio State winning it. Ohio State might be the most talented team in the country. And then Georgia, Utah, this one's not going to be close. I'm going to have Georgia by a long shot. And then Ohio State, Georgia. I'm tempted to pick Georgia here just because my power rating does have them as the best team in the preseason when you factor in all the coaching, their personnel, their depth. But I'm going to have Ohio State here. We'll see if a team can actually get out of that first round to win. I mean, it's just so many more games now with this format. So I'm going to have Ohio State just because of the fatigue of Georgia and just how brutal their schedule's been all year. But let me know your guys' predictions below and like and subscribe for more.